Today's training might be a little rough. You sure talk a lot.
What's up, guys, and welcome to What the Gaming.
What the?
So I feel like sometimes what I say can be perceived as pessimism when it comes to the SoulCalibur franchise, but that's not exactly a reflection of how I feel inside. So I kind of want to put that out there and try to make this video a little bit more positive and hopeful for the future, as we have gotten a lot of things happening in the SoulCalibur sphere. So I do want to take all that in consideration and talk about what our aspirations could possibly mean for the future, or how likely that is for those things to actually come about. So just come with me on this ride and let's just try to have an open conversation about what's going on and our feelings around this franchise that we all love. So I was talking with a friend of mine on X named Yoshi Cookie, and if you're in the SoulCalibur space, you probably know who he is. We talk a bunch about certain things that have to do with like the future of the franchise in particular. He falls on the hard optimism side, while I am not nearly cynical or pessimistic, but I tend to like just go fact by fact and try to like weigh the odds of like how likely things are to happen and move in what direction and how. And I can be a little bit too matter-of-factly when it comes to that, but I don't feel like I'm at fault for that either. Now, I do have to applaud people that do have a positive overall aspirational kind of view of where the franchise is headed, as if like a lot of these things falling into place are 100% like going to happen. I, on the other hand, am a little bit on the side of the center, just being as the facts that we've seen from the past of like Motohiro Okubo actually doing a splendid job with SoulCalibur 6, and then moving on to greater pastures, I guess you would say, and then the franchise kind of being in limbo at that point. Project Soul working on a lot of different things, as well as like Tekken after they screwed up their update really bad. People going to Harada for asking for when SoulCalibur is coming back, and him saying things like "ask me again in 10 years," and generally speaking, not much in the way of Bandai Namco actually putting forth any kind of positive affirmations of what we're going to see in the future. But there are subtleties of what's happening behind the scenes that actually play into, I believe, Yoshi's optimism and people that share his point of view. And I just want to give him a little bit of credit in that aspect to looking up what's going on and what's happened recently in the past couple of years to kind of show anything that's kind of happened in the way of positive goals towards an eventual SoulCalibur 7. And I wanted to start with, we haven't had, like, since December of 2020, I believe, was the last time we had an update for SoulCalibur 6. It was when Hwangsung Young was released. So obviously a lot of people took that as being like the end of the game, kind of, even though there were other characters that were in the game's files that we covered, such as Yoon-Song, Rock, etc. But I think that like when it comes to this game in general, like, it is nice to see these incremental shifts towards a next eventual game, just so we have some kind of positive affirmation. So I am going to go into what Yoshi Cookie replied to me, because I saw him replying to a bunch of people on X about like the different moves that were happening when people were calling SoulCalibur a dead series. So I kind of believe what he's saying was in the right direction. So I do want to give him his laurels for that, and I want to go over what he told me in DMs, because I actually asked him to just like break it down, the most recent things that have happened, just so we can point us in a direction of a possibility that the series is like still at least like kicking, if you want to go for that. And here are the things that he said. I'm going to be looking down at my phone just so I can exactly quote him, but the recent events of SoulCalibur that have transpired are December 2023. We had SoulCalibur Broken Destiny, the PSP version, single player only, released on PS4 and PS5 via PlayStation Classics Collection. Then we had October 2025. We had Bandai Namco renew the trademark for SoulCalibur. January 2025, Bandai Namco republishes all SoulCalibur soundtracks on iTunes, Spotify, etc. for streaming purposes. And then June 2025, we have SoulCalibur 2 come out on the Switch 2. And finally, in October 2025, SoulCalibur 3 comes out, or is at least announced, for the PlayStation 4/PlayStation 5 via PlayStation Classics Collection. And we've talked about all of this stuff on the channel, but it's just nice to see it consolidated as being all of these things have kind of happened in sequential order of like leading up to this point, to see that a lot of stuff has actually happened in not only 2023 but 2025 as well. You know, we have updates, like, well, not updates in particular, but a lot of these things that can mean different things. Like, we know that like trademarks don't really mean much in the way of Japan because they can just be like making a new pachinko machine for an arcade or something like that, and it still requires a trademark to license. And republishing the soundtracks on iTunes and Spotify for streaming, that is a good thing. They can make extra money off of that based off ads, but again, that could just be like them taking them off and then republishing them so that the licenses are like renewed, is the way that I see that. SoulCalibur Switch coming out on SoulCalibur 2 coming out on Switch 2 was a kind of a shocker to me. Like, true, it is in the GameCube app kind of thing, which is like the equivalent to like PlayStation Classics, except for the fact most PlayStation Classics you can actually like standalone purchase. So SoulCalibur 3 coming out is probably going to be standalone purchase for like $9.99 or $14.99 at some point, where you can just download that yourself. I'm guessing the same thing with Tekken 3, but we're talking about SoulCalibur right now. So I've heard a lot of good things and a lot of bad things about these, but that doesn't really matter right now when it comes to this. It just shows that there is a positive momentum and some movement in behind the scenes that are like pointing towards a potential like SoulCalibur 7. And I don't know when that's going to be, honestly. Like, I made a lot of predictions in the past based on the evidence that I was given at that time, but then the evidence has since moved away from that, and I was a big proponent of the fact that just because Motohiro Okubo was leaving for greener pastures didn't necessarily mean that the game was like in limbo or not going to happen, or the franchise was doing something else. But it does seem that Bandai Namco doesn't really care as much as they would some of their other IPs, such as Tekken, which is not fair, because a lot of people that I know that are like huge into SoulCalibur are like, that's like their best fighting, that's their favorite fighting game franchise of all time. And when I'm looking at these, it does show, like I said, an upward momentum. But I think this also shows Bandai Namco like that we're interested in the franchise. Like, if enough of us purchase SoulCalibur 3 as a standalone title that we're supposed to do, or that we have the option to do, or that we're even just playing it in general, like seeing that like game time up there. Those of us who are on Switch 2, as abysmal as I heard the online is, I heard the online is so bad on that it's like barely playable, but that's what you can expect, I guess, from one of their just like apps, not like an actual standalone title. Like, that's just a game that's within the GameCube app, right? It's like you don't expect on the GameCube app of like Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness to have like to be able to trade Pokemon or do any of the stuff that like maybe you possibly can to home. I have no idea. I haven't looked into that yet. I'm just saying that like you're not gonna have all the functionality of those games that they were meant to have, and if they are functioning, they're not going to be at the peak point of functioning as like a remake or a remaster or like an HD release would actually entail them to be, if you know what I mean. It's kind of like up to the behest of the servers of that particular app, not necessarily Nintendo themselves. So that's not really like neither here nor there, but again, I'm just trying to state it as a fact instead of like leaning one way or the other. But it is nice to see that they're actually still making moves, and SoulCalibur is still somewhat alive as a franchise doing whatever it's doing. That's something that I'm exceedingly happy and excited for, because obviously as a SoulCalibur fan, I want to see all these things happen, especially SoulCalibur 3. Now, there's always those rumors that I want to address of people talking about an HD collection, and this is all leading towards some HD collection, which would include like Soul Blade, SoulCalibur, SoulCalibur 2, and SoulCalibur 3 at the very least. And those are the three that would potentially make the most sense for an HD remake. 4 and 5 have their own host of problems with licensing and stuff that would be really hard to get them in. Cosmos and Telos being characters that you can customize, create using the pieces, isn't so much a huge deal to get a trademark for that. The bigger deal is the distribution rights that Sony holds over that game, being an exclusive game to Sony because they helped fund it. That is the one obstacle you need to overcome for that. And then obviously, like, whatever version that they make for SoulCalibur 2 is either going to be Heihachi or Heihachi and Spawn, and probably no Link like we usually see, because Nintendo doesn't really put their characters out there like that for some reason. But in any case, if that does happen, I'll be super excited about that. But I am kind of excited about SoulCalibur 6 coming out, because even if I can't like play directly with friends and we can't like do versus, I think couch is a thing. So like when my friends come over, like we used to do couch co-op. But I do really hope that people get their hands on this game, because it is like my favorite personal SoulCalibur game, and it will be fun to play at least like on my PS5 instead of like having to boot it up on my PS2. Though the one regret that I do have is I really wish they would just make the HD, I mean the, not the HD, the arcade version of the game available. That's just like the superior version of the game. You have Huang like in there in the roster, you have like Night Terror as a playable character, yada yada yada, you guys know the deal. But I just wanted to put this out there and give you guys my thoughts on the current happenings behind the scenes at Bandai Namco in regards to SoulCalibur. And now I want to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I'm not going to get to the poll this week, but we will definitely do it in the next video. But like I always say, guys, I will catch you on the next one. Peace.
Ivy Valentine subscribes to Mark Yoon. So should you. Enjoy your treat!
Sorry, but I gotta go.